All right.
Your meeting, Jim.
I just take minutes. I don't run anything.
Oh, I thought you were in charge of everything, April, so. Okay, well, let's go ahead and start. Welcome, everybody. Yeah, and I took a look at the email that came out, and I thought, oh, they're sending it out very early this time. And I thought, oh, wait a minute, it is September.
You are enjoying your retirement, Jim.
Very much. Let's go ahead and do some introductions again. I'm Jim Michalis, chair of the committee.
Gary Morley.
Brent Tobler.
Mike Whimpey.
Rob Moore.
Quinn Fenton.
I'm Reed Price, an assistant public works director here at the city.
LaNae Millet on the city council.
Go
April
ahead.
Nelson.
In charge.
Rick Sabey, Stormwater. Jim Moore, Parks. Cody Steggell, Streets and GIS.
Tyler Peay, the Public Works Assistant Works Director.
Okay. Well, welcome. On the minutes, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right, I guess, Quinn, we'll turn the time over to you to give us a review of the water.
All right, that sounds good. Me and Reed are going to kind of work on it together, and we'll go through some slides, and it should be fun.
All right, I'll kick it off. I'll let Quinn talk about the nuts and bolts of the water division, and then I'll talk about some more of the more obscure, not quite as exciting and interesting stuff of organizations that we work with and plans that we have, things like that. Just to give the Public Works Advisory Commission a little bit of an overview of what my responsibilities are in Public Works. I oversee the city's water resources, and the water resources consist of the water division, the water reclamation division or sewer, as well as the stormwater division. This group has had presentations from the stormwater division already, as well as the water reclamation, where we went down and went on a tour of that. We, to complete your education of what we do at Public Works in regards to water resources, we have this presentation today to talk about what we do for water. So the water division is divided up into essentially three different areas. We've got the water supply group. Water supply is the group that gets the water, makes sure that it's clean, and puts it into the pipes. And there's various aspects of that. They're the ones that test water quality to make sure that it's clean. They maintain the tanks, make sure the wells run. They have a backflow cross connection responsibility to make sure that water doesn't flow back into the system that could be potentially contaminated. PRVs, which reduce the pressure, coordinate treatment with the Central Utah Water Conservancy District, which treats most of our water. And then also they have a GIS under them. So supply, you can think, get the water out of the mountains or pull it up from underground and put it into the pipes. Once it's into the pipes, then it goes to the distribution group. Distribution group's the one that makes sure that the pipes are maintained. If there are leaks that happen, they go fix the leaks. If there's pipe replacement that needs to be done, they will go and do that. They also are responsible for blue staking. You've heard the call, what is it, 8191? No, 811 is blue stakes. Before you dig, you need to call 811. They'll come out and mark up your yard, and then you can dig, just to protect the utilities. Then we have the utility billing group. This group is responsible for reading the meters each month, and they've led the effort to install new meters throughout the city we'll get into some details of where we're at in that process. The idea there is to replace the meters and give the citizens access to their usage data. It'll be automatic meters that are being read, and all of our residents will be able to view how much water they used on a daily basis. And then they do these other things, perform on-off delinquent services. If somebody hasn't paid their bill, they're the ones that have to be the mean guy to go turn the water off so that they pay, and those types of things. So that's just an overview of the major responsibilities that the water division has. This is our hard-working group. We see Quinn's there as the division manager, and you can see there are 4 groups that are here. The one that I didn't mention was the instrumentation control group, the electricians. We share them with the water reclamation plant, and so there is an additional group that's there. It's relatively small. You can see we've got the water distribution group, the water metering and utility group, and the supply group. They're a hard-working group of employees, and a lot of them are young. Most of our technicians, kind of that are below the supervisors, they've been here for 3 years or less. So we're educating them. We're glad they like their job, because we're trying to foster and grow this young group of employees to be able to service the community for many years.
And you've got a number of vacancies.
Yeah, these vacancies here are time-limited positions. Their responsibilities were to get out and change meters, and we knew that there would be a sunset. So there's not a lot of people that are like, hey, yeah, you want this job? We're going to let you go in a few months. So they're difficult to fill. So, but for the most part, we're elated to have all of these positions filled, because had we looked at this a couple years ago, there would have been a lot more vacancies, and we were just struggling to find people that would last as an employee doing this type of work. It's very demanding. It's very physical. You get called out late at night to come in and fix very challenging water main breaks. It's very demanding. Middle of the night, middle of the winter.
I know, and on Christmas Eve and
Yep, all that.
you know, that we had the same problem at UVU.
Yeah. So with that, turn it over to Quinn.
All right. Well, as has been mentioned, I'm the division manager and new to that position for about 1 year. I have worked for the city for 28 years, and most all of my time has been spent in the field as a field supervisor or crew leader, technician. All those positions in most all the time has been in water supply, so that's kind of my passion. But this the manager position has brought some new challenges to me, and it's been kind of fun to get to learn some of the roles there and the administrative parts, and it's definitely been challenging and fun. So but a little bit more about the what happens in the field and stuff. That's what, as Reed mentioned, what I'm going to talk about today. Just as a little introduction, you know, you look at our water system, and it's old, but it's a pretty big system. Over 350 miles of main line out there. If you look at the amount of service lines. 23,798 service lines. So that's the line that connects from the water main that goes into the meter. And our guys have, they get a lot of calls on those. The city is responsible for those also. Probably I'd say about 25% of those are galvanized. Back in 2015 it was about 40%. So we've been replacing a lot of those galvanized services as we go also. We have 12 pressure zones. So Most of the tanks are located up on the east side, and if there was no pressure reducing valves going down through the distribution system, you'd have about 300 pounds down on the west side of town. So throughout the system, there's 12 different zones. Through those zones, there's about 100 pressure regulating stations that reduce the pressure. We try to keep it anywhere between 50, 60 to about 120, 130 pounds. So as the pressure builds and gets up to about 120 pounds, 130 pounds, it's reduced again back to 60, and then it'll build back up with elevation. So that's kind of, there's a lot of maintenance associated with those pressure valves, and we have one of our crew leaders that's kind of assigned that and oversees that program. As far as maintenance goes on the distribution system, so far this year we've had 105 leaks that require excavation. There's a lot of leaks that we've repaired that have been like inside of a meter can or a meter valve or something like that's not tracked in here. These all required excavation. As Reed mentioned, it's kind of demanding. I was driving down the road on Sunday night about 8 o'clock, and my phone beeped, and I noticed the distribution guys were getting called for a broken water line. And when I got here on Monday, I followed up with them to see how it went, and they were still working on it because the pipe had split a couple times. They were working on an old main in an old part of town and had uncovered multiple problems, and so they came out Sunday night at about 8 o'clock, and they were still here on Monday morning when we started work. So, but 105 excavation required leaks in 2023. It's quite a bit of work they do, but a lot of the old pipe is getting replaced, and that should go down in the future. We have a leak detection program. We have a South Valley Water Leak Detection. They come in here every week and set up correlators. They find a lot of leaks for us before they even surface, and we're able to go out and control the situation, excavate when it's not an emergency, do the repair during working hours, and that way it can be a little bit more scheduled. That's been very, very helpful for us. As I mentioned before, galvanized replacements. Anytime that there's a road project or something like that, we try and get in there and replace all the galvanized service, evaluate the water main, pothole it, see its condition, and get anything that we can upgraded underneath the road so it's not newly paved and have water come.
What are you
through it.
replacing galvanized with?
Poly and copper.
Polyan.
Yep. A lot of it is poly just because of the cost, and actually the lifespan of poly has proven to be really, really efficient and long. I mean, the copper will still even corrode in the right soil conditions, and so the poly has been just for the cost and everything. The one downfall is it's hard to locate, but we've been pulling a tracer wire or installing a tracer wire with it so it can be located. And there's not many contractors or anything on the homeowner side that are using copper anymore. So, yep. We also get a lot of customer concerns and requests. We have a person set aside each day that is following up on those. It might be a water pressure concern, and we find a lot of these are on the homeowner side, whether they're PRV in their house or something has some issues. But we do have somebody set aside to go out every day, and they are resolving any customer concerns. If it's a water pressure with their sprinklers, we try and help as much as we can. Water quality concern, if they have anything like that. So there's a lot of those that we handle also. On the supply side, as Reed mentioned, we have 3 sources of water. Surface water, 60%. Springs, 15%. and groundwater 25. And we'll get into each one of those just a little bit more as we go through these, but that's what where Orem's water comes from. This graph displays throughout the year the different sources of water: surface water, spring water, and well water. Now, we have residents call and say, where does my water come from? It's all kind of blended together. There are certain areas of town that could be stronger spring water or well water, depending on what's operating, but it's kind of all blended together in the tanks. But the surface water, you can see the blue, that is water that is treated by Central Utah Water up at the LaNae Christiansen Regional Water Treatment Plant, and we increase it as summer goes on, and same with our well water. And then the cool thing is our springs will increase as the summer goes because of the snow melt finally getting down into the springs and starting to come out, and so our springs peak right when we need it to also. So water supply in 2022, we produced 7.69 billion gallons. Our average daily production for the year was 21 million gallons. That's for the whole year. So during the peak summer months, May through September, we were 34.4 million gallons per day. And then in the off-peak months, our average was 12.2 million gallons. The highest recorded that I've seen is 61.5 million gallons. So I was explaining that to my kids last night. And they're like, that sounds like a lot of water. How much is that? 61 million gallons in 24 hours? Is that a lot for a city or whatever? And so I said, let's do a little Googling. So we jumped on the internet. And a Olympic swimming pool holds about 600,000 gallons. So that is 100 Olympic swimming pools in 24 hours that Orem used. That's 1 mile. If you line those Olympic swim pools up end to end, it's 1 mile of Olympic swimming pool in 24 hours. That's a lot of water to get treated and delivered to the customers. So a little bit about our wells. We have 9 wells, one that, we actually have 10 wells, 9 equipped wells that are ready to go right now. 8 of those wells are electrically powered, and 1 of them is powered by natural gas. The water section also has a 600 kilowatt mobile generator that's capable of powering 5 of these wells in the event of one at a time, in the event of a big power outage. And the natural gas well also has a backup generator, so we can, in the event of a power outage, that will run also. 5 of the well sites have gas chlorinators. The water quality is good enough that it doesn't need to be chlorinated, but we like to keep a chlorine residual throughout the whole distribution system just to meet state standards and to reduce any potential bacteria in the water. We have 11 chlorine analyzers that monitor the chlorine residual 24 hours a day, and we watch that and maintain just a residual that is keeps the water safe. And so, any questions?
Quinn mentioned we had 9 wells that are outfitted to pump water. The 10th is the new one that's right next to the tank project on 4th South and 4th West. If you've had a chance to drive by that, there's a big straw that we've put in the ground, and we're just waiting for the tank project to progress a little further before we put a building over the top of that straw that we put into the ground, and we'll start using that to fill the tank in the next year and a half.
You've completed the drilling on that, right?
Yeah, and we've tested it. That's why you see it's greater than 4,000. We outfitted that well to test it to see how much it would produce. We also needed to test the water quality to make sure that it was going to be good water that we were pumping. Kind of an interesting thing where you have to you cross your fingers and say, all right, we've spent millions of dollars here to put this hole in the ground. Is it going to be good water? And it was. Central's drilled them, and it's been frustrating for a couple that's like, the water quality is not good enough, and then they have to go back to the drawing board and say, what do we need to do to make this water cleaner, which comes at a higher cost. So we had good, clean water coming out of our well number 10.
And you're gonna talk about that project later on today?
We'll mention it. If you have questions, we can talk about it now.
How well is it going, the project?
It's coming along well. They're on schedule. There were a couple bumps related to concrete. They didn't bring enough concrete, and we had to have continuous pour for the different sections that they were doing, and one section they had to rip out and put back in. But for the most part, it seems to be going along well. They're on schedule.
And what is the schedule?
I don't have that. Lane Gray, he's our construction manager, who would know that. Does anybody? He's not in here. Chris, do you?
It's gonna be another 1.5 to 2 years for the whole thing.
Yeah, completion is spring of 2025.
We don't. We're finalizing designs of the pump house and the well house. But it's a good project.
So a little bit about the springs. The spring flow will follow the snowpack, so it's kind of fun to be able to watch that as the weather year will start in October, and then by January, February, we start to know how good the springs are going to be doing, and then as the runoff starts, you can see the chart up here. The red line was our flow for this year out the springs. And so the purple line on there is average. Over on the left side of that chart is the gallons per day. So that would be, Out the Springs was producing over 7 million gallons a day. That's peaked this year. The average, that right there where Reed's pointing, that's typically what it produces. Well, the snowpack was that much above average, and so hence the springs produced that much more. It was an awesome year.
Do we share that with anyone?
What's that?
Do we have full water rights to that?
Yep.
We don't share it with anyone?
No. And the Alpha Springs is the cheapest water in the city also, because it's all gravity. Comes down off the side of Timpanogos, is transferred over some tanks. All we do to that is add a little bit of chlorine to it, and it's pristine water, and it goes in, it's already up on and has that elevation, so it doesn't need to be pumped or anything. It's an awesome source of water.
So the land that it comes from, is that all federally owned land, or is there a chance of development of that land ever?
It's on Forest Service. The spring itself sits up on Forest Service property. Yep.
So it's pretty secure.
Yeah, it's pretty secure. Yeah. And the spring itself is up. Well, you can see the upper spring, this picture. I mean, we have springs up in the ledges on the side of Timpanogos there that, there's nothing else that land could be used for. Canyon Springs has not quite peaked yet. Canyon Springs sits right there by Timpanogos Park, quarter mile up Provo Canyon, and there's a lower elevation, and now the water is just starting to get to there through the ground. So it is on the rise. Actually, yesterday we crossed 1 million gallons per day production there. And that water is gathered through 13 different little collection areas and come down into a tank, gets a little bit of chlorine, and then it has a pump station, pumps it right up by Palisade Drive and into the drinking water system there also. It does require a lot of maintenance, the springs do, and that's kind of what, when Reed was introducing the groups, that's what our supply group works on. Do daily and weekly spring checks. We monitor the security there. We check turbidity and different things that could be a potential water quality issue. Pipe and spring box maintenance, deep-rooted vegetation, and some high angle work up at our upper spring. So And then the surface water component, the city has rights, natural flow and storage rights that are accessed through the Provo River that come from the high Uinta area. And those storage rights are held in Deer Creek and Jordanelle. And this is the 60% of the city's water. This is where it comes from and is treated at Central Utah's plant. And so, yeah, I don't know if there's any questions or any comments on any of that.
If we didn't have these, if our forefathers hadn't participated in these projects, we wouldn't be the city we are now. To have 60% of our water come from these sources because they had the foresight to grab shares in companies and water and water rights. We're grateful to them. We have a diverse portfolio of water in our wells and our surface water, and in our springs. There are communities that rely solely on wells, and who knows, 50 years from now, will the water table be? Will they be able to pull water out? Who knows?
Yeah, that brings up a good point. If you look at the water rights up there and the amount of acre feet, it could supply the whole city all the water for the year, but you never know if it's going to be a dry year or the river. The river commissioner might say, hey, the Provo River is being cut, or your natural flow water is cut, and so the planning, it is awesome that they acquired that water.
In dry years, there are communities that come to us wanting to rent our water for the year. If we don't need it, we're happy to rent it to them.
So who makes the decision whether you open the spillway or the, I don't know what you would call it, we used to call it the spillway, but I know there's other ways down underneath, right, of Deer Creek?
So that would be, I've not been involved in that, but it would be a collaborative effort with Central Utah Water, who manages Jordanelle, the Provo River Water Users Association, which manages Deer Creek. Their responsibilities are to capture as much water for their shareholders as possible. However, like last year, the reservoirs were very low. We had a great winter. So they worked together to figure out, all right, how much do we expect to need to fill this up? How much is up there? Should we release any? And there was very little early release to help mitigate flooding, because they wanted to make sure that it was filled. This year, they're all relatively full compared to last year, so they will need to work together to determine how much is in the mountains if we have another very good winter, and collectively a decision would be made to release water to mitigate for flooding. But their primary goal is to make sure that those reservoirs get as full as possible. But they have to take flooding into consideration. So I don't know if there's one person that says we need to release, but Central would ultimately decide if that was to happen at Jordanelle, and then the Provo River Water Users Association would at Deer Creek.
LaNae, was your question at all regarding renting water out?
No,
Okay.
it was just who actually makes those decisions, because they are owned by two different.
So Metro of Orem would make a decision regarding leasing or renting water to other communities if it's available.
So we don't claim our water rights. We don't say we want to claim this much water. It's all just coordinated through the release.
So by our yearly annual agreement, we would allow others to use it,
Okay.
but they pay for it.
Yeah, we would, if it's been a great year and we know that the flows are going to be normal, they're not being drastically cut. We know that the shares of water that we have in certain companies and the water rights that we have enough to share, and so we rent it out. But if it was a dry year and they came to us and we weren't comfortable, we're like, sorry, we're going to need it for our own community. Good luck. And
So we're not bound by those contracts necessarily.
Yeah, it's an annual thing that we do. They come to us and say, hey, can we rent water from you this year? We talk with the Metropolitan Water District of Orem board, and they say, yeah, let's do it. Or we make a recommendation to the board that we better not this year.
Yeah, so once all that water is treated and comes down from the springs or pumped out of the ground, we have to do something with it, so we put it in our storage reservoirs. In the top picture there, you can see the lower tanks there down in the bottom right corner. You can, to get a reference point, the cemetery right there in the bottom corner. Above that, you can see the two Central Utah tanks, and then the upper tanks are right there, and they're buried tanks right where Reed's got the pointer. So those little lower tanks that are down there, that's a picture. You can see one of our workers inside there doing an inspection. We have a 3 million and a 5 million gallon reservoir down there. They're still constructed tanks. They were completely sandblasted and recoated in 2011. And then we have the two upper tanks that the springs feed, and they are both buried concrete tanks. And there is also a pump station that has the ability to move the water between the tanks. And then we have a 400,000 gallon tank above Skyline Drive that feeds just a couple subdivisions there, and then there's a pressure release valve there also. And then a 50,000 gallon reservoir up the canyon that just houses that water that comes from Canyon Springs, and then that's where it gets chlorinated and then pumped down the canyon. And so currently about 22 million gallons of storage, and as we mentioned, some days we could have 50, 60 million gallons of use. So as a state requirement, they like you to be able to store so much water for peak day, and so that's the point of the construction of the 10 million gallon reservoir that's being built currently. And that's going to be down there on 400 South, as I'm sure you're aware.
With that tank, we will be in compliance with the state's recommendations of how much storage we should have. As our community grows, there will be an additional need for additional storage elsewhere in the city, and I'll talk briefly about that when we talk about the master plan.
Any questions regarding the tanks? Storage reservoirs? Water quality, we have an annual sampling program. We have a water quality program manager who does a great job, and he follows the state's guidance on sampling, and we have a program in place, and he goes out and does a lot of routine sampling that is required, but he also does a lot of sampling that is not required, just to keep an eye on things and water quality. And but one of the main things that we test for is bacteria. 1,272 routine samples last year. Anytime a new water line comes in and is being constructed, we follow AWWA standards and also pull bacteria samples on that before it can be turned into the system. And then investigative water samples also, like investigative samples aren't required, but we do those like in the spring if we haven't used the well for quite a few months. We're going to pull a sample on it before we assume that it is good and just make sure that there is no bacteria. Every 3 years, the state comes down and does a full inspection. It's called a sanitary survey on our drinking water system, and they review our cross-connection control program. They go to all of our facilities, springs, tanks, wells, and they go looking through there and do a thorough inspection, and then they assess points where they find, something small like a screen is the wrong size might be 15 points, and or a gasket missing on a tank might be 50 points. Community water systems are allowed up to 150 points before they put it under review and say maybe it's not even an approved system after 150 points. Our 2023 sanitary survey was completed. We had 0 points assessed. And so that's due to the work of the whole team that Reed showed, all 3 groups.
Do you do any testing for the forever chemicals, the PFAS and that?
I'm sorry, what's
Do you
that?
do any testing for the forever chemicals, the PFAS? And
Yes, yep, we will, and that'll be starting. So unregulated contaminant monitoring, the EPA will have us go out and sample for things that are not even regulated yet. PFAS and PFOS will be starting in 2025. And we have done, the state actually came down in a little pilot program that they did and did testing on all of our well sources just to see what was in there. They said that there was some trace, that their letter says there was nothing detected. But then as UCMR gets out there, they start looking for just trace amounts. And so, yeah, that's being looked at and sampled for and will be in the future. But you bet we'll be on top of it.
So with the testing, Quinn mentioned the consumer confidence report. This is a copy. You're welcome to grab one. It's also available online. In fact, the rules are that if you wherever the municipality's main web page needs to have a link to this report on the main page. So if you go to orem.org and scroll to the bottom, you'll access the most recent copy of the consumer confidence report. But you guys won't need to do that because you're holding a hard copy right now. So.
I got a question. You hear more and more lately about toxic algae buildups. I noticed Utah Lake, and is there any chance that could get worse at Jordan and Deer Creek and somehow affect the water quality that we're getting out of central Utah?
Yeah, and I think that the algae, obviously, Deer Creek, they talked about it this year, and especially up on the shallows on the other end. Central Utah has their ozone facility and an awesome water quality program that would take care of any of that. So I don't think that's a big concern for us. So Central Utah is on top of that for our surface water, and then obviously the groundwater doesn't have that issue because the temperature and everything is controlled down in the ground.
Who runs Utah Lake? Central Utah, Provo Water usually. Who's
Runs which lake?
Utah Lake?
So there's a Utah Lake water users group that would primarily of large irrigators that have the water rights to Utah Lake water. No water from Utah Lake is used for drinking purposes at this point. It's all used for irrigation of crops.
Agriculture. Okay.
All right, so let's get to some of the boring stuff now. So the water division, we manage the water fund. We call it Fund 51. Got 51 is water, 52 is water reclamation, 55 is stormwater. Our FY24 budget revenues is projected to be $18,750,933. We get that money through essentially 2 fees. One's the base rate. Everybody's charged to connect to the system. Most of our meters are 3/4 inch meters and are charged $20.45 per month. The usage rate is tiered. And based on the volumes, the next slide will show what those volumes are for the different size meters, because you're allowed different volumes of water for the size of meter that you have. But in tier 1, it's 85 cents per 1,000 gallons, $1.06 per 1,000 gallons in tier 2, $1.26 in tier 3, and $1.49 per 1,000 gallons in tier 4. So this is a state mandated regulation that we have tiers. The primary purpose of these tiers is to encourage conservation. As a city, we came up with these tiers and set the volumes at levels that we felt would allow the citizens to use enough water within their home in the lower rate, in the lower tier.
And we went to that system a few years ago, right?
That was in 2017. Yeah, we've been doing this for a little while.
So what's your home occupancy level? I mean, like family of 4?
Yeah, so let's see, 0 to 11 million gallons, 11,000 gallons.
I guess
What
I
we-
mean, what's per person
Uh,
per day that is in a home? Like if you say 11,000 gallons in a home should last them for a day, how many people are in that house?
That I don't know if we calculate. We calculated, we looked at winter use of all of the residents in the city and took 95% of the volume that was being used in each home and came up with this 11,000 gallons. 11,000 gallons is 95% of our community will be able to meet their indoor household use with 11,000
Okay,
gallons.
thank you.
Does that?
Yep, that answered it.
Okay. Let's see, we talked about 400 miles of pipe, we talked about the meters. 80% of them are 3/4 inch, 16% are 1 inch, and 4% are between 1.5 and 2 inch meters. With regards to the meters, we currently have about 97% of the meters that have been replaced. We've got about 800 left that we need to do. We plan to have those done by the end of the year. And then there was a supply chain issue with the endpoints, which is the device that sends the signal to communicate to us how much water was used on a daily basis. We received shipment on those last month, and we've got about 5,000 of those that we need to go back out and put those in, and we plan to have that all done so that we can make this data available to the community next year. So a lot of the community is hooked up, but we haven't quite rolled it out just yet. Okay, we talked about this. This is a screenshot of the budget. It shows the different rates that are charged per tier, and then based on the meter size, these are the volumes that you're allowed in each of those for each of those meters. So if you have a 1 inch meter, you're allowed up to 18,000 gallons in tier 1. However, you're paying more for your base rate. These are the base rates. You can see for a 1 inch meter, you're paying almost double for that base rate in order to have more capacity of water flowing to your home.
Do you ever have folks not use all that tier 1?
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's very common in the winter. Yep. Let's see. So, the water master plan. In 2016, the city went through a rigorous process to create master plans for the entire division, for the water, wastewater, and stormwater systems. The main purpose was to come up with a capital facility plan. What infrastructure does the city need to invest in, and ultimately what is it going to cost? So there was a rate study that was applied with that as well. It was finalized in February 2016. It was updated in 2021, and we need to update our impact fees as well. So we're going through another minor update of the master plans again, so that we can update the impact fees, or the fees that are charged to developers when they come in and want to put a development in. So we're currently finalizing that. We will run the final versions, the draft versions of those plans by this group to get buy-in. Your influence back in 2016 was very influential to help educate the city council and show support for doing this. The city council can also point to this group and say, LaNae would be the representative that said that yes, there was great support from the Public Works Advisory Commission to support this plan. This is something that we need to do. So you will have great influence when it comes to adopting the updated plan here in the next several months. The plan back in 2016 suggested that we needed a 10 million gallon water tank, a new well, number 10, a booster station, and also recommended doing AMI, the automatic meter infrastructure. All of those projects are in process right now and should be completed. The AMI project this year, the other, the tank, the booster station, and well should be completed in the next year and a half or so. It also identified other projects that we need to be planning for. One was to relocate well number 1, which is near the hill, in the Hillcrest neighborhood. Also to put a new well in, which we have called well number 11, and that would be up on 1600 North, just east of State Street, is where we've identified the ideal location would be. And then I mentioned earlier, because the community will continue to grow, and with our new tank we will meet the state's storage requirement. It's expected that we will need an additional storage facility or tank somewhere in the city, and so we'll be doing that in the next 10-15 years as well. And
in
then
what quadrant do you need that?
right now it's been the location that we've identified is in the northeast quadrant.
It'd be up by the treatment plant.
Would it? Okay.
And then probably a very important part of the plan is water line replacement. We're an aging city. We have to replace the water lines. Quinn mentioned how many breaks we've had. Well, that's just going to continue to grow. And once these are the main large capital items that need to be done. Replacing a pipe in the road may seem simple compared to these, but with 350 miles, it's quite the effort that needs to be done. It's very expensive to do. So we will, once we get these taken care of, we can focus a lot on water line replacement in the most troublesome areas in the city. Okay, I mentioned the utility rate study. We had Lewis, Young, Robertson, Birmingham review all of the rates, and they suggested what our rates should be so that we could meet our debt obligations as well as continue operations and maintenance of the system. And the City Council has been receptive to the plan that's been put in place. You'll recall back in 2016, the rate study was to pay a pay-as-you-go plan. Let's save up and pay for these projects with cash. However, the current, was it the current city council? We decided to bond and spread the responsibility of paying for these large projects over many years. Users that will use it for many years. So there are bond obligations that we have to pay for those as well.
That was also with the rates that you could get on the bonds too at the time.
Yeah, we had excellent rates. Yeah, we should have borrowed a lot more.
Is this also being updated as part of the master plan update?
Yes. Yeah, in fact, there are some projects that we listed here that will be included. We're looking at aquifer recharge, which will come at a cost. We need to add that in there, which would increase the capital costs. In particular, water reclamation. In fact, the City Council approved a capital facility plan, a $160 million capital facility plan over the next 20 years, and with that, we'll be spending $10 to $20 million a year to upgrade our plant to for seismic purposes, for capacity issues, and just it's an aging plant as well. We need to invest in it, and so that will come with a rate plan, which includes bonding and some pay-as-you-go as well.
And also significant escalation in construction costs in the
Yes.
past couple of years.
Yep, exactly.
And the other municipalities that are using our infrastructure, that we're charging to use our infrastructure, I'm guessing that they're paying a higher rate.
Yeah, we
don't,
yeah, we've
we're benefiting from that in a way that, because we're providing it, but do you know what I'm asking?
yes, that we have contracts with both Vineyard and Linden, and they will pay for what the amount that they need to pay according to the contracts that we're.
And then in 2016, we bumped the rates, and then 2021, we brought them down. Was it 15%? Or, I mean,
Yeah, about that.
Okay.
And the reason that we were able to drop the rates was because the decision was made to bond. So we didn't need to save a lot of cash. We just needed to make debt payments over 20 years. And so we didn't need as much money to do the projects that we had.
And then we changed it. Would you go to the tiers? So were the changes made on tier 2 and tier 3 then for that? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
The rate, adoptive fees? Or did we increase the gallons per tier?
No, the tiers stayed, the gallons in the tiers stayed the same. It was just the rates that changed.
Okay.
And I believe all of the rates in the tiers were decreased,
Okay.
if I remember correctly.
That was in 2021.
Yeah.
Because we're still getting pushback on that.
That you didn't go
From
low
the-
enough?
Exactly. From the residents. I get emails all the time.
Yeah. It's
In July.
that there is a sense of pride that the city has had to say we've got the lowest water rates in the state. But if you have the lowest water rates, you're not investing in your system as much, which is a concern that, as the manager of the system, that's concerning. As a citizen of Orem, I recognize that I have not paid my fair share to replace this system over the past 25 years that I've lived here because we've had low water rates. I feel I should have paid more because it costs to maintain the system. If we kick the can down the road and keep the water rates really low, at some point things are going to become much more expensive to replace. If we could replace it methodically with, it would. As the manager of the water system, that would be my preference. But it's often driven by the citizens who don't want to pay.
Are there any municipalities in the state that have I can't remember what it's called, for people on a fixed income?
We do.
Offset, do we do that?
You adopted it.
When did we adopt that?
I had a city council meeting a while ago. Through Dave
So-
Spencer's influence on that.
Mm-hmm. So are we because those are people reaching out to me, right? I'm on a fixed income, what can I do? Are they automatically made aware of that, or are we communicating that to people?
Well, it's in the billings, and it's in our rates, and we advertise it that way. It was publicly advertised to the meetings that we've had through city council.
Okay.
I don't know how many participate in that, but primarily it goes through Utah County through the, what do you call that program? It's the
Yeah, I know.
it's through that, and then also through
The one that does utilities.
It's the circuit breaker program. Circuit breaker program that qualifies them to get additional reductions here.
Okay.
At all.
So are they the ones who qualify people, the circuit breaker, and then that?
We use that as the method to determine if they would qualify, yeah.
Okay, good.
Because that circuit breaker program determines whether or not they are have a poverty level of income as determined by whoever. And then they have to submit their tax information, and go through a review. It's not that hard to do, I don't think, but they have to do it annually because things change on a year-to-year basis for income and so forth. And then through the community action program also they can receive a reduction. So it's a three-pronged approach. It's through the county, through community action, and through Orem City that they can receive a reduction.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
Yeah. I can send you more details on that.
Okay.
All right, another thing is the water conservation plan. If you recall, a year ago, I presented to this group the water conservation plan, and which needs to be adopted by the city council every 5 years. So we updated it last year, and this is basically the plan to make sure that we are doing, we're making great efforts to try to promote water conservation in our community. This was a graph that I shared last year, showing the 10-year history of water consumption in the city, and this is on a per capita basis. You can see that back in 2012 we were around 290 gallons per capita per day in the city, and with conservation efforts, not just by the city, but I think through the media as well, and just an overall understanding that we're a growing population in Utah. We have a limited amount of water. We should conserve more. I think that there's a general understanding through the public that a greater understanding of the need to conserve. But you can see that we've dropped down to below 210 gallons per capita per day just 10 years later.
And that was during one of the worst droughts we've had in recent history.
Yep.
Which was quite ironic.
So with
Pretty amazing.
with our water consumption goal, the green line shows the goal where we want to be by 2030. The blue line shows the actual, and the red line shows a 5-year rolling average, which would give us a better feel for what's going, what the long-term need will be. And you can see that when this plan was created in 2022, that our gallons per capita per day was below the trend line that we want to meet. So we're in good shape. We'll be getting updated numbers here in the next month for the previous water year, and we'll be able to update this and see what happened to this number. We had a great winter. Did the conservation mindset change because we've got so much water, we don't need to be quite as conservation minded? But we'll find out. My expectation is that we'll still be well below the green line, but my bet is that it goes up a little bit. But that's just what my gut tells me.
It will, because there's some properties that haven't watered at all that just look really bad, right? And they need to do something about that. So,
so we'll see what happens. We reviewed the goals, the water conservation goals, last year when we reviewed this with this group. But those goals are to reduce the city's water usage to reflect the regional water conservation goals for 2030. That's what the green line is on this graph. Maintain an effective conservation-oriented water pricing structure each year. Maintain our tiered rates. Complete the meter replacement project by the end of 2022. That was our goal. It's going to be the end of 2023 because of the supply chain issues that we had. Construct a tertiary treatment process at the water reclamation facility to produce water for irrigation by 2025. That's the reuse project that is being constructed right now at the wastewater treatment plant. Continue education efforts to the public regarding water conservation. I always have a mindset to communicate conservation in the city. And then replace the automatic sprinkler controllers on all city-owned properties to newer technology by 2025.
We're ahead of schedule on that last one.
Yeah, we're ahead of schedule on that, right, Jim?
Yeah, well, except for the cemetery will be done by the end of this year. So,
Breaking all kinds of records. And how's that project? That's been a great improvement to the park system,
It's been, I think so. I just visually seeing what's going on and knowing the background of it and everything, I think it's improved things quite a bit. We don't have any hard numbers on water conservation yet because we're really just coming to the end of our first year of usage, so by sometime next year, we should start getting a few numbers in and actually seeing what we're starting to say. So.
Yeah, the old systems that you had also was to help conserve water, but it was a much clunkier system.
It was kind of outdated technology. The old system, only one user at a time could make adjustments, use the system. Now everything's cloud-based. You have 50 people at a time on it. It's just, everything's run through your phone. You don't have to run back and forth between the problem and the controller and things like that. So it's helped us a lot.
The city's water fund helped pay for these, as did a grant program through the Central Utah Water Conservancy District. Let's see, these are some of the practices that we want to encourage, which are reflected in the water conservation plan. We finished an all hazards emergency response plan, which Quinn knows more about than me, so I'll let him speak to that.
Yeah, so the America Water Infrastructure Act that was in 2017 required municipalities to have an approved emergency response plan and put in place. And so a consultant was hired, and they came in here and they brought all the key players in the water system, and they did a vulnerability assessment. And it was a little bit eye-opening because they looked at certain things that maybe we weren't really thinking about, where we were vulnerable as a water system, like new employees or cybersecurity of our SCADA system. I mean, they looked at earthquake, and then they would score everything on how likely it was to happen. And it was interesting because they said, how about a wildfire? And we're like, oh, a wildfire's not really going to affect us. And then the range fire happened right in the middle of it. And then, how about a pandemic? Oh, well, I don't know. And then COVID's happening. We're going through all this during COVID and having to do a lot of the meetings remotely. And then we got back together. And now we finally just barely received the final copy. They got it all approved through the EPA, but now we have an emergency response plan to follow. It addresses where the water system's vulnerable and actions that we can take to prevent, keep our water system secure. So it's a great document to guide us through that.
Well, and I loved I think, Chris, you said this. The new tank, isn't there some way that if everything were shut down, people could still come and fill, their things with water for emergency reasons?
Yeah, depending on the level of an event that occurs, whether it's a natural disaster and so forth, there would be deployment. And worst case scenario, we would work with the National Guard, I think, as well, and they would deploy water buffaloes for people to come, and those just portable storage facilities where they can fill those up. So, I mean, that is extreme. It's worst case, but I watch movies.
I appreciate your thinking about it. Preparing for it.
Yeah, they have an organized plan and effort ready to go.
So I was in the San Francisco earthquake, and I know what that feels like to not
yeah.
have any power, nothing, and everything's a disaster. It's
Yeah.
like a war zone. It's freaky.
How did they do that with water? Was anything?
The water was okay. You just couldn't get gas, right? Because there was no electricity. You couldn't. Yeah.
Mhm.
Phones didn't work.
Yeah.
Some of the key relationships that we have with different governmental organizations are listed here, including the EPA, the Department of Environmental Quality and Division of Drinking Water. Utah has what's called primacy. Utah can, which is basically EPA giving the state of Utah the responsibility to regulate the water, the drinking water system, as well as the sewer systems and stormwater systems. So the state of Utah is the one that sets the rules and regulations for our utility. We also work closely with Central Utah Water Conservancy District, and we have the Metropolitan Water District of Orem. It's its own governmental organization, and its primary purpose is to secure and maintain and manage our drinking water sources, primarily the rights and the shares in companies that we have. Our water portfolio, that group, that's their responsibility. And it's that group that is the reason why Orem is in such a good position when it comes to water supply on an annual basis, and in particular in drought years. We also work with the Provo River Water Users Association. That's an organization in which we have many shares of water storage up at Deer Creek. The Provo Reservoir Canal Users, shares in that company. Provo Bench Canal, an irrigation company, North Union Canal Company, all are companies that we have water shares in, which provide water to our citizens. We also participate on the Provo River Watershed Council, a group that's working to make sure that the watershed remains clean and will continue to provide good drinking water for our community. And of course, we work with Linden City, Provo City, and Vineyard. We work with the American Water Works Association, Rural Water Association of Utah, and Utah Water Users. So that is the end of our presentation. Any questions?
Oh, thanks, Reed. Thanks, Quinn.
That, I think, in our effort, as Public Works effort to educate you, you've heard from, let's see, streets, stormwater, water reclamation,
Traffic,
and traffic. So we still need to hear from fleet and parks, and maybe GIS, since GIS is a new division. So we'll put our division managers on notice that to start getting at least as exciting of a presentation as you just heard today in the future. So.
Well, it's been a very informative presentation.
Throw down the
We
gauntlet
appreciate
there.
that.
Some of the challenges we're facing right now, immediate challenges, would be updating the master plans. The capital facilities plan for the treatment plant was recently adopted. That's a $160 million project in the next, in today's dollars. That was projected to take place over a 20-year period. It's a bit daunting of a task that we have before us, and I don't know how the rates are going to come in, but they're not going to. They're going to go up. There's no other way around that. And so we're going to be working with the financial consultants on developing that. As we start teaming with them, we're going to have them come in and present to you what we're looking at in terms of how to pay for these enormous tasks and infrastructure improvements. So that's what we have before us right now as our major challenges.
Once again, thanks for your presentation. Chris, any additional business?
Just a date for next time we want to meet. I'd recommend we meet next month. Same Tuesday, if that works for everybody.
Yeah.
April, do you have a date for that?
That'll be the 24th of October.
24th is the fourth Tuesday.
Well, let's see, we want the second or the third. Second or third is usually what we want to go on.
Let's go with the third then.
17th.
Yeah. Does that work for everybody?
Problems, anybody? Okay. All right. Anything else, Chris?
I don't have anything.
All right. Well, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody, for attending. Appreciate you all being here.
Good.